The courtyard was clean. Not merely clean. Ordered. Peaceful. As if nothing inside this household was struggling the way it ought to. That bothered her more than she cared to admit. Her eldest daughter-in-law followed behind her, silent, observing. They found Lingling in the kitchen. Not startled. Not scrambling. Not apologizing. She simply looked up. Mother. Calm, respectful, entirely unreadable. For the first time in years, Madame Chun had the unsettling feeling that she was looking at a stranger. The conversation began the way such conversations always began, with concern. You look different. I feel well. A pause, the kind of pause designed to suggest a deficiency. You're eating more. I am. A woman your size is healthy, quiet, even, not defensive, not angry, simply true. Madame Chen's eyes narrowed. The old Lingling would have lowered her head. The old Lingling would have apologized. This one looked back. The twins, Madame Chen tried again. A family should continue to grow. 2 healthy children are a blessing. Yes, but they are fed, Lingling said. They are loved. They are happy. She turned fully then, and suddenly Madame Chun understood what had changed. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't pride. It was that this woman no longer needed permission to exist. I cannot have more children, Lingling continued. That is true, but I have made peace with it. A pause. What I will not do, her voice remained gentle, is apologize for it. The kitchen became very quiet. Even the eldest daughter-in-law stopped breathing for a moment. Madame Chen stared. When had this happened? When had this girl stopped being afraid of her? And perhaps more frightening, when had her son stopped needing her approval? Muyang deserves. Muyang, said a voice from the doorway. Quiet. Final. Is here. He had come home early. She would wonder about that later, whether he had known, whether husbands who loved their wives that much simply developed an instinct for danger. He stood in the doorway. Dust on his clothes, dirt on his hands, and the particular stillness of a man who had understood everything before anyone had spoken. His eyes found Lingling first. They always found Lingling first. Are you all right? Yes. He nodded once, as though that were the most important information in the room. Then he turned to his mother. Not angry, not disappointed, just certain. Mother. He stepped inside, set down his tools. I heard. Madame Chen straightened. Then you understand. I understand, he said. That my wife has been spoken to in a way that will not happen again. The silence after that was complete. Madame Chen looked at her son, her youngest, the one she had never quite been able to move. You would speak to your mother this way, she said. For her, I would speak the truth, he said. To anyone. A pause. You are my mother. I love you. I will greet you in the street, and I will come if you need help, and I will honor you, as I always have. His voice was even, unhurried. But this house is mine. My wife is mine to protect. And what is said inside these walls is mine to answer for. He met her eyes. So I am answering. Madame Chen left. She didn't storm out. That would have required an audience worth performing for. She simply went, her daughter-in-law trailing after her like a shadow that had lost its shape. The gate closed. The courtyard was quiet again. After Madame Chen left, the house became quiet again. The twins were still outside, arguing over something so insignificant that neither of them would remember it by tomorrow. Lingling stood in the kitchen, breathing, nothing more. Muyang came to stand beside her. Not in front, not behind, beside. Exactly where he had always chosen to stand. They'll talk, she said. Yes, the village will hear by tomorrow. Yes. She looked at him. Does that concern you? He considered the question seriously, as he considered everything. Then he said, What concerns me? That he looked at her. Is that she made you feel like something you are not. Her chest tightened. And did she? He asked, a long pause. No. He nodded. Good. That was all. No speech. No comfort. No reassurances. Just certainty. As if her answer had settled the matter completely. And somehow, that felt more comforting than anything else he could have said. That night, after the twins had fallen asleep and the house had gone quiet, Lingling stood in the doorway and watched him repairing a broken basket under the lamp. 28 years. She had spent 28 years learning how to survive, learning how to prepare, learning how to endure loneliness. She had prepared for hunger, for disaster, for the end of the world. She had never prepared for this, for someone who chose her before she arrived, and then kept choosing her. Every day. Outside. The village talked. Of course it did. For versions by nightfall, 6 by the following morning. At least 2 of them completely unrecognizable from what had actually happened. Muyang greeted his mother in the street 2 days later, civilly, calmly, as he always had. He did not explain himself. He did not appear to feel that he needed to. And Lingling watched him from the gate as he walked back toward the house. This quiet, certain, immovable man, who had chosen her before she even arrived, who had kept choosing her every single day since. And thought, 28 years. I spent 28 years preparing for survival. I never once prepared for this. For someone who makes survival feel like something worth doing. Xiaoyang pulsed once on her wrist, warm, steady, like it agreed. The first time the children saw the future, they told the children 3 days later. Not because they needed 3 days to decide. The decision had already been made. They needed 3 days to figure out how to explain another world to 2 5-year-olds. As it turned out, they didn't. Mama has another home, Ye concluded after listening for less than a minute. Lingling blinked. Not exactly. Bao Bao frowned. A secret home. Also not exactly. A magic home. Lingling opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Muyang. He considered the question. Close enough, he said. That settled it. The children accepted the existence of another world with the same ease they accepted rain, chickens, and the fact that adults occasionally made very poor decisions. The next question was more important. Are there snacks? Yeya asked. Yes, Lingling admitted. Then when do we go? The morning they chose was clear. No visitors expected. No market day. No reason for anyone to notice if the Chun household became unusually quiet for an hour. The twins wore their best clothes. Not because anyone had asked them to. Because they had decided independently that visiting another world was an important occasion. Bao Bao had also brought a stick. For protection. Against what? He could not explain. Muyang allowed it. Lingling had stopped questioning certain aspects of parenthood. The door stood waiting inside the space. White. Still. Impossible. The children stood before it, neither afraid. Only curious. Mama. Yeya asked. Yes, it. Will the people there know us? The question hit Lingling harder than she expected. She crouched. No. Yeya looked worried. Then what if they don't like us? Before Lingling could answer, Muyang spoke. They don't have to. The little girl looked up. His expression hadn't changed. You have us. Yeya considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Lingling had to look away for a moment. She opened the door. Sound poured through first, not noise. A world, engines, voices, music from somewhere too far away to identify. The twins froze. Bao Bao's hand found Muyang's immediately. Ye grabbed Lingling's sleeve. And then, slowly, they stepped through. The alley was exactly as Lingling remembered. Concrete walls, faded paint, power lines overhead, the smell of gasoline and food and rain trapped in the city. The children stared upward, and upward, and upward. Why are the houses so tall? Bao Bao whispered. So more people can live in them. Lingling answered. He thought about that. That's inefficient. Muyang made a noise that sounded suspiciously like agreement. Yeya pointed. What's that? A bicycle passed. What's that? A bus. What's that? A dog wearing a sweater. Lingling answered as quickly as she could. After the 20th question, she stopped trying to predict where the next one would come from. Muyang, meanwhile, was silent. Not because he was overwhelmed, because he was observing. Always observing. She watched him watch traffic lights, automatic doors, glass storefronts, people walking past without noticing them. He looked less surprised than she had expected. More thoughtful. As though he had accepted that if one impossible thing existed, perhaps the world had always contained more than anyone knew. The convenience store nearly ended them. Not physically, emotionally. The twins stood in front of the refrigerated section in complete silence. Bao Bao touched the glass. It's cold. Yes, but the fire isn't underneath. No. He turned. His face held the expression of someone whose understanding of reality had just suffered permanent damage. Yeya found the ice cream. That was worse. 5 minutes later, both children sat outside the store with melting ice cream and expressions of profound spiritual fulfillment. I understand now, Yeya announced. What? Lingling asked. Why Mama came from here? Lingling nearly choked. And why is that? Yeya took another bite. Because they have this. Bao Bao nodded solemnly. This world is powerful. For the first time that day, Muyang laughed. Not quietly, not briefly. Actually laughed. People turned to look, he didn't notice, or didn't care. Lingling stared. She had heard him laugh before. But never like this. Never because he was happy. Not relieved. Not amused. Happy. The realization settled somewhere deep inside her. She had spent an entire year preparing supplies. She had never considered preparing for happiness. At the 40-minute mark, they entered a pharmacy. The children had exhausted themselves on modern civilization and were content to sit quietly. Muyang walked the aisles, slowly, carefully. He stopped in front of infant medicine, then children's fever reducers, then antibiotics. He didn't ask what they were. He listened, remembered, calculated. Finally, he looked at Lingling. If there is famine, he said quietly. Yes, we survive. She nodded. If there is plague, we survive. She nodded. If there is plague, we survive. He was silent for a moment. Then, if there is war, Lingling looked at him, at the man who had never once asked whether he himself would survive, only whether his family would. We survive that too, she said. He held her gaze, then nodded, as if he had expected no other answer. At 50 minutes, Xiaoyang pulsed warmly against her wrist. Time to go. The twins protested, loudly. The dog in the sweater had apparently changed their lives. Promises of future visits were required, several. When they finally stepped back through the door, the space welcomed them with its familiar silence. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ye yawned. Can we live in both worlds? Lingling opened her mouth, but Muyang answered first. Perhaps. The little girl smiled, satisfied. Bao Bao had already fallen asleep standing up. Muyang picked him up effortlessly. Then he looked at Lingling. We'll come back. It wasn't a question. It wasn't hope. It was a decision. And somehow, standing there between two worlds, Lingling realized that for the first time in either life, she believed him. The first real problem arrived 32 days after the children saw the future. Not a flood, not a famine, not bandits, just a fever. Lingling would later think that there was something profoundly unfair about that. She had spent 28 years preparing for disasters, and the first thing that truly tested her was a child with a fever. It started just before sunset. The village was settling into evening. Smoke rose from cooking fires. The twins were in the courtyard arguing about whether ducks were birds or a separate category of creature entirely. Muyang was repairing a broken hoe. Lingling was grinding dried herbs she had no intention of actually using. Then someone pounded on their gate. Not knocked. Pounded. 3 times. Hard. Everyone froze. The twins looked up. Muyang stood before the third strike landed. He crossed the courtyard in 6 strides, opened the gate, and found old Zhao's wife standing there. She was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, the way people cry when they've already spent hours trying not to. Chun Muyang, she said, then looked past him. Madam Chun, not his mother, Lingling. The title surprised her. The boy, Zhao's wife whispered. My son. And suddenly Lingling understood. The child was 7. His name was Zhao Wan. She knew him, not well. It was the quiet one. The one who always shared his snacks with Yaya. The one who followed Bao Bao around despite Bao Bao's insistence that he was too young to understand important matters. He was burning. Lingling knew at the moment she stepped into the house. The room smelled wrong. Heat, sweat, fear. The village healer sat nearby, exhausted, defeated. She looked up as Lingling entered. I've done everything I can, which meant that I don't know what else to do. The boy's mother sat beside the bed. His father stood in the corner, looking helpless, as though he had already begun bargaining with the universe. Lingling sat beside the child, touched his forehead. Too hot, much too hot. She had seen fevers before, not here. In hospitals, in television dramas, in medical articles she had read at 3 in the morning because she couldn't sleep, and suddenly she knew. She knew exactly what she needed, and exactly where it was, inside the space. She looked up at Muyang. He was standing in the doorway, watching her, not asking, just watching. She stood. We should speak outside. No one objected. Perhaps because everyone already understood that whatever hope remained had just walked out of the room. The evening air was cool. The sky was turning dark. The village sounds continued around them. People cooking. Children laughing. A dog barking somewhere far away. The world had not noticed that one small boy might die tonight. Lingling folded her arms. Not because she was cold. Because she didn't know what to do with her hands. I have medicine. Muyang nodded. I know. She stared at him. You know, you have medicine for everything. That was true. She had stockpiled for pandemics, for disasters, for societal collapse. She had enough antibiotics in the space to treat half the village, and that was the problem. If I give it to him, they'll ask questions. Yes, if I don't. She couldn't finish. She didn't need to. Muyang looked toward the Zhao house. The light in the window flickered. They love him, he said. Yes, he is a good child. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. Long enough that she almost thought he hadn't heard the fear hidden inside her words. Then he said, then we save him. Simple, immediate, as though there had never been another option. She laughed. Once. Not because anything was funny, because she had spent so much of her life preparing for impossible decisions. And somehow the answer had been that simple all along. They'll ask where I got it. Then we answer, with what? He looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something in his expression she had never seen before. Not anger, not certainty, protectiveness, cold, absolute. The truth, he said. She blinked. What? The truth that protects our family. He stepped closer. If they ask, you traded for it. They'll want to know with whom. Then you don't remember. They'll think I'm lying. Yes. The answer came immediately, as though he had already considered this. As long as they think you're lying, he said quietly, they won't think you're hiding another world. The words settled between them. Practical. Terrifying. Correct. She stared at him and suddenly understood something she had somehow missed. She had spent 28 years learning how to survive. Muyang had spent his entire life learning how to protect what was his, and now she was his. The children were his. The secret was his. He would defend all of it, without hesitation, without apology. The medicine worked. Of course it worked. By dawn, the fever had broken. By noon, Zhao Wen was awake. By evening, he was asking for food. His mother cried. His father cried. The village healer cried. The boy himself complained that everyone was being strange, which, according to Bao Bao, proved that he was healthy again. The village noticed. Of course it did. The child had been dying. Then he wasn't. There are only so many explanations people accept for that. By sunset, there were already 3 versions of the story. By the following morning, there were 7. One involved mountain spirits. Another involved a hidden physician. One particularly ambitious version involved divine intervention. No one guessed the truth. Because the truth was impossible, that night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Lingling sat in the courtyard. The moon was bright. The village was quiet. Muyang sat beside her, not speaking, just there. After a long while, she asked, did I do the right thing? He considered the question, not because he doubted the answer, because he respected the question. Yes, he said. What if this causes problems later? Then we solve them later. What if people keep asking? Then we keep answering. She laughed softly. You really aren't worried. He turned toward her. And for a moment, she saw the man who had walked into another world and asked how many people pain medicine could save. I am worried, he said. She blinked. You are? Yes. About what? He looked at her. Not the village. Not the rumors. Not the secret, her. That next time, he said quietly, you will think you need permission to save someone. The night became very still. She felt something tighten painfully in her chest. Because he had understood. Not the problem, her. The fear underneath it. She looked away. Toward the stars. Toward the life she had left behind. Toward the life she had somehow found. 28 years. 28 years of preparing for the end of the world. And she had never prepared for someone who looked at her like she was worth protecting too. Beside her, Xiaoyang pulsed once. Warm, steady. And for the first time since she had arrived in this world, Lingling had the strange feeling that the system wasn't evaluating her. It was proud of her. The rumor reached Madame Chun on the 3rd day, not because it was true, because it was interesting. And in villages, interesting things traveled faster than truth ever could. She heard 3 versions before breakfast. By noon, there were 6. By evening, she had decided that all of them were wrong. And that somehow made the situation worse, because one fact remained constant in every telling. Zhao Wen had been dying, and now he wasn't. Madame Chin sat in her courtyard, shelling beans with the concentration of a woman who was absolutely not thinking about something, and therefore thinking about nothing else. Her eldest daughter-in-law sat beside her, carefully, quietly. Finally, she said, they say the younger household had medicine. Madam Chun didn't look up. People say many things. They say Madam Lingling brought it. The bean pod snapped in Madam Chen's hand. She set it down. She has no family. Yes. No connections. Yes. No money. Yes. She looked up. Then where did she get medicine that saved a dying child? The younger woman had no answer. That, Madam Chen thought, was exactly the problem. Meanwhile, in the smaller Chen household, life continued. Because life always continued. Bao Bao had decided he was a healer now. This decision was based entirely on the fact that he had watched his mother hand someone medicine. He spent the morning attempting to treat a chicken with a scraped knee. The chicken disagreed violently. Yeah, having determined that medicine was too stressful a profession, had instead become his assistant. Her duties appeared to consist primarily of announcing things. The patient is unhappy. I noticed it. The patient is escaping it. I noticed that too. The patient has pecked you. Yes, yeah. Lingling watched from the doorway. Muyang walked into the courtyard carrying firewood. He took in the scene. The screaming chicken. The screaming children. His wife trying not to laugh. He considered this, then asked, is the patient recovering? Bao Bao looked up, completely serious. We're still evaluating. Muyang nodded. Good, and continued walking. Lingling stared at his back. You're encouraging them. Note, you aren't. I am respecting their profession. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. That evening, someone knocked on the gate, not pounded. Knocked, carefully. Lingling knew who it was before Muyang opened it, Madam Chun. Of course, she entered with the expression of a woman who had spent 3 days preparing a conversation and intended to use every word of it. She Saturday. Accepted tea, looked around. The house was clean. The children were healthy. The food smelled good. Again, too good, too healthy, too peaceful. She disliked all of it. Finally, she spoke. I heard about Zhao. Muyang nodded. He is recovering. Yes. A pause. They say your wife had medicine. They say many things, Muyang replied. Madam Chen's eyes narrowed. She had taught him that answer. She didn't enjoy hearing it used against her. She turned to Lingling. Did you? Lingling looked back, calm, steady, the way she had learned to be. Yes. The honesty surprised everyone. Even Muyang. Where did you get it? I traded for it. With whom? I don't know. Madam Chen stared. You don't know? It was some time ago. Who sells medicine and leaves no name? It. A good merchant, Lingling said. The silence that followed was almost impressive. In the courtyard, a chicken screamed. Madam Chun leaned forward. People are talking. I know, Lingling said. They think strange things. People often do. You don't seem concerned. Lingling considered the question. Then she realized something. She truly wasn't. 3 months ago, she would have been terrified. 3 months ago, she had been someone else. Now she had a husband who had crossed worlds for her. Children who thought modern civilization existed primarily for ice cream. And enough emergency supplies to survive the collapse of civilization. Perspective changed people. I don't think concern will improve the situation, she said. Madam Chen stared. Again, that feeling. The one she hated. Uncertainty. Who was this woman? This daughter-in-law who no longer apologized. Who no longer feared. Who looked at her as though she were simply another person. Then the impossible happened. Bao Bao burst into the room. The chicken escaped. Yaya followed. The patient rejected treatment. The twins stopped, saw Madam Chun, bowed automatically. Then Bao Bao looked at Lingling. We need emergency medicine. For the chicken? Lingling asked. Yes. What's wrong with it? It doesn't respect doctors. Yaya nodded gravely. It's a serious condition. For one terrible second, silence filled the room. Then, Muyang laughed. Actually laughed. Not quietly. Not politely. Laughed. Everyone froze, including him. He almost never did that. The twins looked delighted. Lingling looked astonished. And Madam Chun. Madam Chun looked at her youngest son. Really looked at him. At the man she had raised. At the man who had left her house. At the man who, she suddenly realized, was happy. Not respectful. Not obedient. Not dutiful. Happy. And something inside her shifted. Just slightly. Not enough to change her. Perhaps not enough to admit. But enough to understand one thing she had never understood before. She had not lost her son to his wife. She had simply never been the center of his world. She left shortly after. No accusations, no victory, no answers. At the gate, she paused. Without turning, she asked, "Are you happy?" No one spoke. Then Muyang answered, "Yes." One word, certain. Immediate, she nodded. Once, then walked away. That night, after the children slept, Lingling and Muyang sat outside. The stars were bright. The village was quiet. After a long time, she asked, "Do you think she believed me?" Note, "Do you think she knows I'm lying?" Yes. Lingling sighed. "Is that bad?" He thought about it. Then, note, "Why not?" He looked toward the road his mother had taken. Because she asked the wrong question. Lingling frowned. What was the right question? He turned toward her, not smiling, but close. "Not where you got the medicine." A pause. "Why you gave it away." She looked at him, at this man who understood her better than she understood herself, and quietly, because the thought had been growing inside her for weeks now, she asked, "What if one day we can't hide anymore?" For the first time in a long time, Muyang did not answer immediately. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere, far away, a dog barked. Then he reached for her hand. "If that day comes," he said quietly, "then we'll face it together." And somehow, she believed that more than she believed in the space, more than she believed in the door, more than she believed in fate itself. Because worlds could change, systems could fail, but Chun Muyang had never once changed his mind about her. By the end of the week, the village had stopped pretending it didn't care. That was how Lingling knew things were changing. At first, people had only spoken in passing. Quiet comments, side glances, half-finished sentences that stopped when she walked by. Now they spoke openly enough that she could hear it from the courtyard. Zhaowen really recovered that fast. "I heard it was some rare medicine." No, no, someone said it was traded from outside." "Outside where?" Silence. That question always created silence, because no one could answer it without sounding ridiculous. Or worse, correct. Lingling continued her work as if nothing had changed. She fed the twins. She organized the house. She counted supplies in her head the way she always did. But now, every action felt slightly heavier. Not because she was afraid, because she was aware. Awareness was more dangerous than fear. Fear made people careful. Awareness made them observed. Muyang noticed immediately. Of course he did. He always noticed the things that didn't speak. That evening, after the twins fell asleep, he sat across from her in the courtyard. No lamp between them, just moonlight. "You are thinking too much," he said. "I am thinking appropriately," she replied. A pause. "That is worse." That made her almost smile. Almost. "There will be more questions," Lingling said. "Yes." "And more people watching." "Yes." "And eventually someone will connect things." Muyang nodded. He didn't argue. He never argued with reality, only with outcomes. She looked at him. "You're calm." "I am prepared." "That's not the same thing." He considered this, then said, "It becomes the same thing when you accept responsibility." That sentence stayed in the air longer than the wind did. A sound came from inside the house, a small crash, followed by silence. Then another crash. Lingling sighed. "That is either Bao Bao or a catastrophe." They both stood at the same time. Inside, Bao Bao had attempted to organize medicine, which meant he had opened 3 containers, 2 boxes, and 1 bag that absolutely should not have been opened without supervision. Yaya stood beside him, holding a spoon. "I am assisting," she announced. "You are not assisting," Lingling said. "I am emotionally assisting." Muyang leaned slightly toward Lingling. "That is new." "It is not helpful," she replied. He nodded. Noted. That night, after everything was put back in order, Lingling found herself sitting alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. Her hands rested on the table. Still, for the first time in days, she allowed herself to think clearly. The medicine had saved a life. That was good. But now, people were asking questions. Questions meant attention. Attention meant pressure. Pressure meant exposure. And exposure meant the end of control. The door opened softly. Muyang stepped in. He didn't speak at first. He simply placed 2 cups of warm water on the table, then sat down. "You are going to suggest limiting help," he said. Lingling blinked. "Yes." He nodded once. "I expected that." She looked at him. "You agree?" "I understand it." That was not the same thing as agreeing. She knew that. He continued. "But we will not stop." Her fingers tightened slightly around the cup. I didn't say stop. You fought it. Silence. Because he was right. Muyang leaned back slightly. If we refuse help now, he said, they will notice the pattern. If we continue helping, Lingling replied, they will notice the source. Yes. Another pause. Then he added, but if a child dies because we were afraid of attention, the attention no longer matters. That was it. Simple, clean, irreversible. Lingling looked down at her cup. 28 years of survival training. 28 years of avoiding risk. Of minimizing exposure. Of staying unnoticed. And now, that a man who had never studied systems or probability or consequences beyond his field and his family, was telling her something she understood instinctively but had never allowed herself to choose. Some risks were not strategic. They were human. And if they ask again, she said softly. Muyang didn't hesitate. Then we answer less. And if that is not enough, he met her eyes. Then we decide what matters more. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was heavy, meaningful. From outside, a dog barked. Somewhere in the village, someone laughed. Life continued. Unaware that decisions were being made that would slowly reshape it, Lingling finally spoke. I used to think survival meant staying invisible. Muyang listened. I think I understand better now, she continued. Survival means choosing what you are willing to be seen for. A pause. Then, quieter. I don't know if I am ready for that. Muyang looked at her for a long time, then said, you are already seen. She frowned slightly. By who? Me. That was all. No explanation. No expansion. Just fact. Something in her chest tightened again. Not fear. Not pressure. Something far more complicated. Acceptance being watched by someone who did not judge. Outside, the wind moved through the courtyard. The twins slept. The village whispered. And somewhere in the space, unseen by both of them, Xiaoyang pulsed faintly. Not warning. Not approval. Just awareness. As if the system had also realized something important. This was no longer about hiding power. It was about managing consequences. The first problem did not come as a question. It came as a request, then another, then 5 more. Not by the 10th day after Zhao Wen recovered, Lingling stopped counting. Because counting made it real. And it was already real enough. It started quietly. A woman from the next village, a child with a lingering cough, an old man who could no longer walk without pain. People did not arrive asking for the medicine from nowhere. They arrived asking for help. And they arrived with hope that had already made up its mind. Lingling stood in the courtyard one morning, holding a small container from the space. She stared at it for a long time. Inside was something simple, something powerful, something that, in the XXI century, would be considered ordinary. Here, it was a miracle. And miracles were dangerous when they could be repeated. Muyang came up behind her. He didn't ask what she was holding. He already knew. You've started rationing, he said. Yes. That is good. I don't know if it is enough. He looked past her toward the gate. 2 people were waiting outside. Not entering. Not leaving. Just waiting. That was the new pattern. Waiting until they were noticed. Until they were seen. Until they were chosen. Bao Bao ran past them carrying something that might have once been a chicken. It is recovering, he announced proudly. It is attacking the garden. Ye corrected from behind him. It is expressing gratitude. No, it is not. Lingling closed her eyes briefly. The world, she thought, had never been this chaotic, and she had never felt more responsible for it. That afternoon, she gave medicine again. Not freely, not carelessly, with structure. Rules she created in her head. Fevers first, injuries second, chronic pain only if nothing else remained. No promises, no explanations, only outcomes. That night, Muyang found her sitting in the storage room of the space, surrounded by shelves. Not disorganized, not chaotic, controlled, like her mind made physical. She didn't look up when he entered. I am trying to calculate sustainability, she said. You will fail, he replied. That made her finally look at him. That is not reassuring. It is honest. He walked slowly between the shelves, took in everything, not as a man impressed by abundance, but as a man measuring responsibility. How many people know, he asked, about the medicine? Yes. None. Officially. He nodded. And unofficially? She hesitated. Too many. That was the real problem. Not the medicine. Not the space. Not even the door. It was the fact that suffering created patterns, and patterns created attention, and attention eventually created truth, even when no one wanted it to. Myung stopped beside her. You are trying to solve this like a system problem, he said. It is a system problem. No, he replied calmly. It is a people problem. She frowned. That makes it worse. It makes it simpler. She almost laughed. Almost. Simple how? She asked. He looked at her. And for once, his answer was not immediate. Not because he was unsure. Because he was choosing words carefully. You cannot help everyone, he said. A pause. But you can decide who you are responsible for. Lingling went very still. That is dangerous thinking. Yes. You are drawing a line. Yes. And what happens to everyone outside it? Another pause. Then, quietly, they remain outside it. Silence filled the room. Not hostile, not calm, just heavy with implication. Lingling finally spoke. In my time, people would call that selfish. Muyang nodded. In my time, people would call it survival. She looked at him sharply. And what do you call it? He didn't hesitate. Love that is willing to be honest. That word landed differently than she expected. Not soft, not emotional, structural, like something built into the foundation of a house. Outside the space, a faint sound echoed. The door. Someone had come. Lingling tensed immediately. Muyang did not. He simply turned toward the sound. We will decide together, he said. Decide what? Whether today is a day we save someone. A pause. Or a day we protect everything else. Lingling stood slowly, her hands clenched once, then relaxed. This was it. The part no system had ever warned her about. Not gathering resources, not surviving collapse, not building security, but choosing who got to live inside it. She looked at him. You're making me choose first, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, got a step closer. I am making sure you do not choose alone. The knock came again, more urgent now, more desperate. Outside the space, the world was waiting. Inside it, a woman who had spent 28 years learning how to survive was finally learning something else. Survival was no longer the question. Responsibility was, and Xiaoyang pulsed once, soft, steady, as if the system itself was no longer watching what she took, but what she would become when she gave. The person at the gate was not who Lingling expected. It wasn't an old neighbor, not a desperate parent, not even someone from the village. It was a man she had never seen before, too clean to be local, too calm to be lost. And behind him, two more figures. One carried a bundle wrapped in cloth. The other watched the surroundings like they were counting exits. Muyang noticed immediately. His body didn't tense. But something in the air changed around him. Not fear. Assessment. Lingling stepped forward slowly. Can I help you? The man smiled. Polite. Practiced. I hear this household helps people. That word again. Helps. Never saves. Never miracles. Helps made it sound harmless. Manageable. Controllable. From inside the courtyard, Bao Bao shouted. Mama. The chicken escaped again. Yaya corrected. It is evolving. Lingling closed her eyes for half a second. Bad timing. Always bad timing. The stranger's eyes flicked briefly toward the sound, then back to her. We came from the next district, he said. People talk. Of course they do. They said you have medicine. Lingling said nothing. Silence was also an answer, just not a safe one. Muyang stepped closer, not aggressive, just present. That depends, he said calmly, on what you need. The man studied him now, like he was realizing something important, then smiled slightly wider. We need a lot. That was the first real warning. Not the words, the tone. No desperation, only expectation. Inside Lingling's chest, something tightened, not fear. Recognition. This was not a villager. Villagers asked. This man assumed. What kind of help are we talking about? Lingling asked carefully. The man nodded toward the bundle. Enough to stop an outbreak. Silence. That word changed everything. Outbreak. Not injury. Not fever. Something spreading. Something uncontrollable. Muyang didn't react immediately, but Lingling saw it. The shift in his thinking. Not emotional. Strategic. Fast. Dangerously fast. You should go to the city physicians, Lingling said. We did. The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed, and the man shrugged slightly. They said it would take time. That wasn't the problem. The problem was what he didn't say. Time was what people had before they started looking elsewhere. A long silence. Then Muyang spoke. How many people are sick? Enough, the man said. That was not a number. That was pressure disguised as urgency. Lingling felt it immediately. The weight. The shift. Because now it wasn't one child, not one village. It was scale, and scale changed everything. Inside the space, Xiaoyang pulsed faintly. Once, then again. Not warning, not approval. Something closer to calculation. Lingling stepped slightly back. Myong noticed. Of course he did. He didn't look at her, but his voice softened just enough for only her to hear. Not here, he said quietly. She understood instantly. Not here meant. Not in front of strangers. Not under pressure. Not where consequences could be forced. She looked at the man again. I can't give you an answer right now, she said. The man didn't like that. She saw it immediately. Not anger. Impatience. People who come expecting solutions rarely accept delays. How long? He asked. Tonight, Muyang said before Lingling could respond. The man hesitated, then nodded once. But his eyes said something else. We will be back either way. They left, slowly, deliberately, not like villagers, like people who believed doors stayed open for them. When they were gone, silence hit the courtyard harder than usual. The twins were still arguing inside about the evolving chicken. The world continued as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Lingling turned to Muyang. That wasn't a request, she said. No, that was pressure. Yes, and it will happen again. Muyang nodded. Sooner. She exhaled slowly. This is how it starts, she whispered. Starts? He asked. She looked at him. Scale, she said. First one village, then another. Then, she stopped, because she already knew where it ended, and it wasn't small. Muyang stepped closer. Then we decide now, he said. Decide what? His eyes stayed steady. Whether we remain invisible, a pause, or become necessary. That word hit harder than she expected. Necessary. Not wanted. Not known. Necessary. Inside the house, Yaya shouted, Mama, the chicken is leading a revolution. Bao Bao followed immediately. It has supporters. Lingling almost laughed. Almost. Because for the first time, she understood something very clearly. She was no longer managing a household. She was managing a boundary between worlds. She looked at Muyang. And if we become necessary, she said quietly, we stop being safe. He didn't deny it. He didn't soften it. He just answered that yes. Silence again. Heavy. Final. Then Muyang added something softer. But we stop being alone. That changed the air completely. Lingling looked toward the gate, toward the path the strangers had taken, toward the version of her life where everything stayed hidden, then back at her husband, at her children inside the house, at the space she had filled, at the door she could open, at the life she had built without realizing it had weight. Finally, she said, if we do this wrong. Muyang finished the sentence. We lose everything. A pause. Then, if we do nothing, he added, we lose people anyway. That was it. No perfect answer, no safe path, only direction. Xiaoyang pulsed once more, strong this time, clear, as if the system had finally stopped observing and started waiting. Part 13, the first time they did not answer immediately. That was the first decision. Not yes, not no, not fear, not guilt, just not immediately. The twins were asleep by the time Lingling and Muyang entered the space. Bao Bao had fallen asleep holding a wooden spoon. He claimed it was medical equipment. Yaya had fallen asleep halfway through explaining why the chicken's revolution had failed. According to her, the chicken lacked organizational skills. Lingling had agreed. She was too tired to argue. Now, the space was quiet. The kind of quiet that existed nowhere else. Not the quiet of a village at night. Not the quiet of loneliness. The quiet of a place built to survive the end of the world. Rows of shelves stretched around them. Medicine, food, seeds, tools, everything she had spent years collecting. Everything she had once believed would save her. And suddenly, it didn't feel like enough. Muyang walked slowly through the aisles, not looking at the labels. Looking at her, he had learned, over the last few months, that when Lingling entered the space and became silent, she was not organizing supplies. She was organizing fear. How many? He asked. She knew what he meant. If it's an infection? Yes. She exhaled. If it's something treatable? Yes. She looked around, at the shelves, at the abundance, at the years of preparation. Hundreds. The word echoed, not because of the space, because of what it implied. Muyang nodded once. not impressed, not shocked, just accepting information. As many as that. Yes, and after, she hesitated. The question she had avoided asking herself. After that, less. How much less? She laughed, a small sound, not because anything was funny, because she had spent years calculating every possible disaster, and somehow never prepared for this one. I don't know. Silence. Not uncomfortable, just true. Then Muyang said, Good. She stared at him. Good. He nodded. If you knew exactly how many people you could save, you would try to save all of them. She opened her mouth, then closed it, because he was right. Again, he walked to the nearest shelf, picked up a bottle, turned it over. He still couldn't read the modern labels, but he had learned what they meant. This place, he said quietly. You built it because you were afraid. She swallowed. Yes. He looked at her. Are you still afraid? The answer came immediately. Yes. He nodded. As you should be. That wasn't comforting. And somehow, because it was Muyang, it helped. He put the bottle back, carefully. The way he handled everything important. We need rules. The words landed heavily. Rules, not hopes, not wishes, rules. Lingling straightened slightly. What kind of rules? He held up one finger. First, he looked directly at her. The door remained secret. She nodded immediately. Agreed. A second finger. The space remained secret. Agreed. A third. The children remained protected. She didn't answer, not because she disagreed, because hearing it spoken aloud hurt. Always, she said. He nodded. Then came the fourth finger. And this one took longer. We do not save everyone. The space became very still. She looked away, at the shelves, at the supplies, at the thousands of decisions she had made over 28 years. I know, she whispered. No. His voice was gentle, but firm. You understand. A pause. You do not know. She hated that, because it was true. Understanding was theoretical. Knowing was what happened when someone died. And who decides? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. For the first time that night, he looked tired. Not physically. Morally. We both do. She nodded slowly. Together. Always together. Then she asked the question she had been avoiding. What if we disagree? The question remained in the air, long enough that she wished she hadn't asked it. Then Muyang surprised her. Then I hope you are right. She blinked. What? He met her eyes. If one day we disagree on who deserves saving, he took a breath. I hope you are the one who is correct. Her chest tightened painfully. What? He smiled, not broadly, just enough, because he had already thought about it. Because he had already decided. Because I learned how to survive from this world. He reached for her hand. You learned how to survive from losing one. The silence after that felt enormous. 28 years alone. 28 years preparing for disasters. 28 years believing that survival was the highest virtue. And this man, this farmer, this patient, stubborn, impossible man, had understood the shape of her loneliness better than she had. She squeezed his hand. I don't want to become cruel. The confession escaped before she could stop it. The real fear, not exposure, not discovery, not losing the space. This, Muyang stepped closer. You won't. You don't know that. No. He smiled again. I know you. And somehow, that felt more certain than any calculation she had ever made. Outside the space, the world waited. The strangers would return tomorrow. The village would continue talking. The questions would grow. The danger would grow. Everything would grow. But tonight there was only the two of them, standing among shelves built for the end of the world, trying to decide how to save one. As they turned to leave, Xiaoyang pulsed brightly, not once, 3 times. Lingling froze. She looked down at her wrist. The little sun glowed, brighter than she had ever seen it. Then, for the first time since it had appeared, that a line of text materialized in the air. Condition met. Family unit successfully established. Phase 2 available. The space went silent. Even the air seemed to stop. Lingling stared, then slowly turned to Muyang. He was staring too, not at the message, at her. And for the first time since she had known him, for the first time, Shin Muyang looked afraid. The message remained suspended in the air, unmoving, unblinking. Impossible. Condition met. Family unit successfully established. Phase 2 available. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lingling had imagined many things. An invasion. A hidden enemy. A countdown. She had never imagined this. A reward. Beside her, Muyang was still looking at her, not the text, her, as though he was trying to determine whether she had known this all along. She hadn't. I didn't, she began. I know, he said quietly. Of course he knew, he always did. Slowly, carefully, she reached toward the floating words. The moment her fingers touched the light, the message dissolved. The space changed, not dramatically, not violently. The shelves remained. The lights remained. The endless quiet remained. But somewhere deep beneath them, something shifted, as though a lock had opened. Then another message appeared. This one much smaller, much simpler. Phase 1 objective, survive, status, completed. Phase 2 objective, build a future. Lingling stared. Build a future, not survive one. Not endure one. Build one. Her throat tightened, because she understood. 28 years preparing for disaster. And the system had never wanted that. It had wanted this, a husband, 2 children, a home, a reason to remain. Another line appeared. New functions available. Community expansion, long-term agricultural optimization, medical production assistance, limited temporal stabilization. Neither of them breathed. Medical production, not storage, production. Lingling looked at Muyang. He was no longer afraid. He was thinking. Dangerously. Say it, she whispered. He looked at her. If the medicine can be produced, she nodded. Then we don't have to choose who receives the last bottle. The space fell silent, because that changed everything. Not immediately, not safely, but fundamentally. No longer a cache, no longer a bunker. A beginning. Another message appeared. Warning. Phase 2 requires expansion of trust network. Minimum recommended community size, 50 individuals. Lingling actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. 50. The system remained unimpressed. Yes, for the first time in her life, Lingling considered arguing with a magical interface. Before she could, another line appeared. Note. Family unit assessment complete. Result. Successful. Nothing happened. No reward. No fanfare. Just those words. Successful. She had failed at so many things. Failed to belong. Failed to stop being lonely. Failed to build a life worth staying in. And somehow, without realizing it, she had succeeded at the only thing she had never thought she would have. A family. She looked at Muyang, at the man who had crossed into another world and asked how many people pain medicine could save, at the man who had never once asked whether she was worth loving, only whether she was all right. Successful, she said softly. He nodded. Yes. She laughed again, a little helplessly. I don't know what we're doing. He stepped closer. Neither did he. She knew that, but he took her hand anyway. Then we'll learn. Simple, like always. From somewhere outside the space, faint and distant, came the sound of Yeye yelling. Bow bow. The chicken is back. Followed immediately by, it has allies. Lingling closed her eyes. Muyang's mouth twitched. Then, for perhaps the 10th time since she had met him, he smiled. Not because the world made sense, because it didn't. Not because they were safe, because they weren't. Not because they knew what came next, because they didn't. But because, somehow, impossibly, against all logic and all probability, they would face it together. And for the first time in 28 years, Lingling realized something. She no longer wanted to survive the end of the world. She wanted to live in the one they were building. They did not build a community. Not at first. At first, they built habits. Because Lingling had learned something important about human beings. People did not trust miracles. They trusted repetition. A child recovered once. A miracle. A child recovered 3 times. A coincidence. A child recovered 10 times. A pattern. And patterns, unlike miracles, could become part of the world. The first rule they established was simple. No one would ever know everything. Not about the space. Not about the door. Not about Xiaoyang. Not even about each other. Knowledge, Lingling had learned in her first life, was not unlike fire. Useful, necessary, and capable of destroying everything if left unattended. So they began carefully. A widow whose crops had failed. A carpenter whose wife suffered from chronic pain. The village healer, who had long ago figured out that Lingling knew more than she should and had wisely decided not to ask why. They helped, not dramatically, not enough to attract legends, just enough to build trust. And trust, it turned out, grew much like crops, slowly, unevenly. until one day you looked up and realized something had taken root. The first person outside the family to enter the space was not who Lingling expected. It was old healer Su, not because she trusted him most. Because he already knew, not the truth, but enough of it. He had watched children recover too quickly, seen wounds heal too cleanly, observed medicines no one in the region had ever heard of, and instead of becoming curious, he had become practical, a quality Muyang respected more than intelligence. When they brought him to the space, he stood still for almost a full minute, not in fear, not in awe, just thinking. Then he looked at the shelves, at the lights, at the impossible, and asked, "How many people can this save?" Lingling nearly laughed. Because of course the first person she trusted outside her family would ask the exact same question her husband had asked. "Hundreds," she said. He nodded. "And after that?" She blinked. "You too." He looked at her. Anyone who has treated patients learns the same lesson. A pause. "There are always more." They told him enough. Not everything. Never everything. He accepted that, not because he lacked curiosity, because he understood that secrets also had to survive. The second person to join them was the village blacksmith, not because he was particularly wise, but because Yeya had announced, to an audience of 17 people, that Mama and Baba have a magical storage room bigger than the sky. Fortunately, everyone had laughed. Unfortunately, the blacksmith had noticed that neither Lingling nor Muyang had. The third was Zhao Wen's father. The fourth was a widow who had buried too many people and refused to bury another. The fifth was a teacher. The sixth was a farmer. By the 10th, Lingling realized they were no longer collecting allies. They were collecting responsibility. The village changed. Not quickly. Never quickly. The children became healthier. The harvest became better. People stopped fearing winter quite as much. And slowly, without anyone deciding it, the small Chun household became something unusual, not powerful, reliable. Madame Chen noticed. Of course she did. She watched people come and go. Watched her youngest son walk through the village with the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needed anyone's approval. Watched Lingling become the kind of woman people sought out rather than criticized. And one evening, she came to visit. Alone. Lingling found her sitting in the courtyard. The twins were older now, 7. Bao Bao was explaining engineering principles to a duck. The duck appeared unconvinced. Yaya was taking notes. "Mother," Lingling said. Madame Chun looked up. For the first time in years, there was no judgment in her eyes, only age. And perhaps something that looked suspiciously like regret. "You built something," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," Lingling replied softly. "We built something." Madame Chun looked toward the fields, toward the village, toward her son. "Yes," she said after a long while. "You did." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Lingling and Muyang stood outside their house. Not the space, not the future. Home. The twins' voices drifted from inside. The village slept. The stars remained where they had always been. Lingling looked at the man beside her. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked. "About what? What would have happened if I hadn't come back?" He thought about it, genuinely, the way he always did. Then he said, "I would have spent my life looking for something." She turned to him. "What?" He smiled, small, certain. "You." She laughed, then cried, then laughed again because she was crying. He held her hand, not because she needed support, because he wanted to. On her wrist, Xiaoyang pulsed one final time. Warm, steady. The next morning came quietly, like every morning before it. And that, Lingling realized as she opened her eyes beside Muyang, was the greatest miracle of all. Not another system notification, not another transmigration, not another impossible mission. Just another day. She smiled before she was even fully awake. Beside her, Muyang was already watching her. "You smiled." "I know. You usually think before you smile." "I don't need to anymore." He laughed softly. Outside, 2 small feet thundered across the courtyard. "Mama." The door burst open. Bao Bao, closely followed by Yeya. Neither child had mastered the concept of knocking. "Mama, we're hungry." "No," Yeya corrected. "You're hungry." "I'm helping." Lingling sighed dramatically. "I see my peaceful morning has been stolen." Bao Bao climbed directly onto the bed. "We borrowed it." Muyang picked him up with one arm. "You stole it. We're returning it after breakfast." Breakfast became noisy, very noisy. Rice ended up where rice was never supposed to be. Someone accused someone else of stealing an egg. The accusation turned out to be correct. The culprit was the dog. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The harvest improved. The new seeds adapted. The medicine saved lives. Not enough for people to notice miracles, just enough for people to believe the Chun household was strangely fortunate. Lingling preferred it that way. Miracles attracted attention. Quiet prosperity did not. The space continued growing. Each visit to the future became less about survival and more about possibilities. Books, tools, medical knowledge, water filters, better farming methods, things that could improve life without changing history too quickly. Muyang always asked the same question before buying anything. Can this help everyone? If the answer was yes, it went into the basket. The children grew. Bao Bao remained fearless. Ye remained clever. Together, they remained exhausting. Sometimes, on warm evenings, the four of them sat beneath the old tree outside their house. No space, no system, no future, no past, just family. Lingling would watch the twins chase fireflies while Muyang repaired farming tools beside her. Neither of them needed to speak much anymore. Silence had become another language they shared. One evening, Xiaoyang appeared, not on her wrist, in front of them. The little golden sun floated quietly in the air. It had never done that before. Lingling frowned. Xiaoyang. The system spun lazily. Then a familiar voice echoed softly. Host mission complete. She blinked. Mission. You were never sent back to change history. You were sent back to reclaim the life you had already lost once. The world became very still. The regret has disappeared. The family is whole. The future has been secured. Space system will remain permanently active. No further missions required. Lingling stared. So that's it. The tiny sun bobbed happily. Live well. Then, it dissolved into thousands of golden lights that drifted into the stars, never to speak again. Lingling looked at the empty sky, then at Muyang. He reached for her hand without saying anything. She squeezed it. I think we're finally home. He smiled. We always were. The years passed the way good things do, quietly, without asking permission. The chicken had become a legend, not the original chicken. The original chicken had lived a long, difficult life and died having accomplished very little besides escaping repeatedly and biting 3 people. But the story of the chicken had survived, which, Bao Bao often claimed, proved that history rewarded charisma over competence. Ye claimed it proved that Bao Bao should never be allowed to teach history. Their mother agreed with Ye. Their father, as always, declined to comment. Bao Bao was 17. Ye was 17. And somehow, despite sharing a birthday, a face shape, and a childhood, they had become entirely different people. Bao Bao had inherited his mother's mind, not her caution. Her mind. He could look at a field and calculate yield. Look at a machine from another world and understand its principles. Look at a problem and immediately begin constructing solutions. He also had the unfortunate habit of believing that every solution required experimentation. This had resulted in 3 minor explosions and 1 major argument with a goat. Ye maintained that the goat had won. Ye had inherited her father's patience and her mother's ability to understand people, a dangerous combination. By 17, half the village trusted her with their secrets. The other half trusted her with their children. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, people had learned to pay attention, even Bao Bao, occasionally. The village had changed, not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough. Children no longer died of fevers that could be treated. Harvests failed less often. People traveled farther, learned more, dreamed bigger. No one called it a miracle. That had been important. Miracles belonged to stories. This belonged to people. The Chun household had changed too. The house was larger now, not grand, just lived in. Built and rebuilt over years of ordinary happiness. There were books. Too many books, according to Muyang. Not enough books, according to everyone else. There were tools. There were maps. There were plans. There was life. And there was still the space. Of course there was. Though it had changed, the shelves remained. The lights remained. The impossible remained. But now there were new sections, gardens, workshops, medical laboratories, places built not to survive the end of the world, places built to improve one. Lingling stood there now, 40 years old. older than she had ever imagined becoming. She sometimes forgot she had once been 28, forgot she had once lived alone, forgot she had once believed that survival and living were the same thing. On her wrist, Xiaoyang remained, still warm, still quiet, still there. She had stopped asking what it wanted years ago, because she had realized something. It had never wanted anything. It had simply waited. Mother. She turned. Yeye stood in the doorway. Not a child, not quite an adult, something in between. The council meeting is starting. Lingling smiled. Is your brother arguing already? Yeye considered. Does breathing count as arguing? Unfortunately. Then yes. They walked back together. Out of the space. Into the evening. Into home. The council consisted of 12 people. Farmers, teachers, healers, craftsmen, people who knew some of the truth. Not all of it, never all of it. At the head of the table sat Chen Muyang. His hair was beginning to silver. He looked exactly the same. Not physically, essentially. Steady. Solid. Certain. He looked up when Lingling entered. Always looked up. Always found her first. After 17 years, he still did. Bao Bao was speaking. Or, more accurately, explaining. Which means that if we increase irrigation efficiency by 12%, where did you get 12%? Someone asked. I calculated it. How? Bao Bao paused. Very confidently. Several people sighed. Yeye sat down. He's been like this all day, she informed them. Lingling sat beside Muyang. He leaned slightly toward her. How bad? He involved mathematics. Muyang closed his eyes briefly. Serious, then. She laughed. He smiled. Small, certain, the same smile. Always the same smile. The meeting continued. People disagreed. People argued. People planned. Outside, children ran through the village. Inside, adults tried to build a future. Ordinary, extraordinary, exactly as it should be. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Lingling and Muyang stood outside. The stars looked the same. They always had. That comforted her. For a long time, neither spoke. They had become very good at silence. Then Muyang asked, do you miss it? She knew what he meant. The other life, the apartment, the loneliness, the 21st century. She thought about it. Honestly, the way he deserved. Sometimes, she said. He nodded, not hurt, just listening. What do you miss? She smiled. Hot showers. He laughed, actually laughed. After all these years, it still surprised her. And what don't you miss? She looked at him, at the house, at the village, at the world they had built. Then she reached for his hand. I don't miss being alone. The night grew quiet, not empty, full. On her wrist, Xiaoyang pulsed. Once, warm, steady. No messages appeared, no missions, no objectives. There was nothing left to explain. Because some stories did not end when the danger passed. Some stories began after. And in the end, Wei Lingling realized that the greatest miracle she had ever witnessed was not another world, not a magical system, not even a second life. It was this, that someone had looked at all the pieces of her, the lonely woman, the frightened survivor, the stranger from another century, the mother, the wife, the person she had been, the person she had become, and chosen all of them, every day, for the rest of their lives, the end. Or rather, as Xiao Yang would probably put it, that phase 2 objective, build a future, status, ongoing.